It's probably worth pointing out that the main parties, even if you do get one from them, can be compelled to vote against you. The Conservatives, Labour and the Lib Dems all use the whip system.
They do.
Which is one that I don't know if you've addressed much, but basically saying if you vote for this person, they agree to what you want, they may still vote against you because they don't want to be on the next Crossrail project, or they don't want to be kicked out of the party coming up to the election.
Yes, that's one of the reasons that the Pirate Party doesn't have a whip system in the UK, although that's at the moment a somewhat theoretical position to take. Okay. Quite happy to admit that, we're standing 6 candidates. The chance of us, therefore, making government is nil, realistically. Yes, I think that's very true. Equally, if they know that they're a very large core constituency that they don't want to go against, that may make them consider that. A good example, and one of the MPs I respect more than a lot, actually, is Julian Hubbard, who's the Lib Dem MP for Cambridge, who deliberately chose not to be in the government because he didn't want to be forced down that way so that he could genuinely stand for his constituents. And that's, is that the right way of doing it? If it was up to me, no, I'd change the system. But right.
No one likes the idea of NSA or GCHQ watching them, but sometimes, there's the argument that it can be useful in order to monitor extremism and so on. What's your view on monitoring by government?
I am very strongly against mass blanket surveillance. If you want to surveil people, then you need to get a judge-mandated court order in order to do so. What we have seen is that adding more hay to the haystack doesn't help you find the needle. In France, they have, with the Charlie Hebdo terrorist attack, the perpetrators of that were on a low-level watch. But they stopped being watched because they had too many other leads to go on that had been picked up through mass surveillance. It doesn't help. In order for it to work, you would need everyone to be reading everything and for nobody to encrypt anything, which is so I would say, in answer to your specific question, targeted surveillance with a court order that's very specific to an individual, by all means, if there's enough evidence for a judge to genuinely grant that, then fair enough. But doing it on a mass basis, just never going to work.
You said 60-70% of those who were eligible voting. How many are actually allowed to vote? Because I'm not, that's
yes, sorry, I was assuming that you could all vote when I did that number, but that's a fair question. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's.
Who's not allowed to vote?
Well, okay. So, yeah.
What about other policies? I can't just, if I did live in Vauxhall, I couldn't just vote you in for digital rights and surveillance. You're still my MP for defence, for
Absolutely.
Education, for infrastructure spending, and a lot of the Pirate Party manifesto seems a bit spotty on the areas that aren't the core interest, for lack of a better term.
That certainly was fair. Our new manifesto will be launched next week, which hopefully mitigates a large number of those issues. One of the things I would say is that we are the only party to run a crowdsourced manifesto process. So instead of saying, this is what we think, you must come and believe it, we ask the public, and you don't have to be a member, to submit suggestions. And we ran that process the last couple of months. And then the suggestions that came in were voted on by members, and the voting finished yesterday. So we're now just putting those together. So we do have a broad manifesto across a wide range of areas. So economically, we would be in favour of a land value tax, for example, as a key economic policy in my area. We would, but what specifically I think what's interesting is that by getting a crowdsourced manifesto, you get expert, or people that think they're experts at least, input in various areas that you might not have occurred to you. And we actually did it on Reddit. We had a big set of discussions about people going, well, actually, that's a good idea, but why wouldn't you tweak it like this, because this is an unintended consequence. And we're looking to build that into a much more fluid process going forward. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
I mean, I can, I've got leaflets, so you can read about all the policies that you've got. But, yes, we do have them on every area, but
Yeah.
I appreciate, in some ways, it's that balance between being, as a minor party, either you're going to be, people have that view, what's your policy on this other area, and you need to have one, you need to be able to say that it counts, but equally, you're going to be, you've got to have something, why are you unique, why are you different, why are you not just the same as everyone else? So that's that balance between your core policies and the broad manifesto is a tricky one.
So two questions really. The first one's a really short one, which is if sort of you said that there are 6 candidates standing in the UK, so you're standing in Vauxhall, where are the other 5? The second question is that suppose on election day, in a massive shock to everyone, a load of minor parties managed to win constituencies, Power Party gets 6 of them, and they're looking to form a coalition government somewhat. So which party do you see yourself aligning with?
That's a great question that I hadn't considered being asked. But given all the other minor parties are being asked, it's probably fair. In answer to your first question, we're standing 6 candidates, 3 up in Manchester Central, Manchester Graafton and Salford and Eccles, 1 in Wales in Bridgend constituency, and 1 in Sheffield Central, and myself in Vauxhall in London. So I'm the only candidate standing in London. In answer to your second question,
How about answering for yourself?
yes, it's one of those, I'm trying to get that balance right between, I think as a party, we don't have a whip system, so it would be up to each individual MP at that stage to make their mind up, although clearly you would try and work together to do that. From a personal perspective, I feel more, there is probably a larger overlap in manifestos with elements of the Green Party and elements of the Lib Dems than the 2 major parties. As an example, the Pirate Party in Europe, we've got an MEP from Germany, did have an MEP from Sweden in the previous parliament, sat in the Green group. So there are some level of overlap there, although there are also strong areas of disagreement. I'm not sure if that answers your question very well.
As well as it can be answered.
I mean, I think, I think what would be core for us would be, what's the best way of getting policies that we care about that matter, but also that you're not letting something that you totally disagree with go through, and how you do that would come out. I hope it happens, but I suspect not realistically.
If we assume that disaster strikes, you're not fortunate enough to win a single seat, what do you think the realistic likely to be on the governance of this country?
Politics is always a long-term game. Unfortunately, unless there are very dramatic changes in the country, that is, such as in Greece with Syriza, it tends to be a very long-term game. The effect of our party on the governance of the country in the short term would be, ideally, I would like us to increase the awareness of the issues that we're talking about in a way that other people aren't. Those digital rights, mass surveillance, copyright reform. And would that have an impact on the governance of the country? Yes, if that, in the way that UKIP, you could argue, have had an impact on the governance of the country because their increase in popularity has made larger parties more aware, for better or worse, of that portion of their core policies. Long term, would that be realistic? Absolutely. In the next government, certainly having the conversations to start. And my particular target in Vauxhall is to get the 5% required to get your deposit back. Because it keeps my treasurer happy, to get the £500 back, but much more importantly because that's a very big media benchmark that's taken as significant. If you save your deposit, the mainstream media will then go, oh actually, who are this party? They also got a reasonable minority of the vote there. What does that mean? What are they actually talking about? And that gives you a bit of a platform.
So in fact, you see yourself as a lobby until you can hit the big time?
Yes, because you have to do that, there's no way of getting to the big time without doing that. And from a personal perspective, yes, when I was deciding to get more involved in politics, I had that difficult decision to make. Do I get involved in a large party where I'm a small voice and I don't agree with a lot of what they're saying? Or do I get involved in a small party where I can actually make a real difference to what the party does, even if the party itself has a small voice? You pay money, you take choice.
Given that you don't have, as a party, you don't believe in the whip system, and you don't have and won't use whips, and your manifesto is written by consensus of not particularly party members, but anyone who's interested.
Just to be clear, suggested by the public, voted on by members.
But how can I be sure that if I vote for you or if I'm in another constituency, I vote for a Pirate Party candidate, that when it comes to one of the sideline elements, that you won't vote against what the manifesto says?
You don't. You can't. You either have a whip system where every MP follows exactly what, well, I was going to say follows exactly what the manifesto says, but lots of MPs have followed the whip system, not follow what the manifesto says. So it doesn't. But I struggle to see a way in which those two unreconcilables can ever be reconciled. Either you have an MP that will genuinely listen to his or her constituents and therefore make a stand against the party as a whole if it's very specifically in the interests of those constituents, or you have someone that only ever follows the party line and doesn't care about the constituents. I don't really see how you can have those reconciled. The only way towards doing that would be if you had, and one of the things that I think really should have happened in the Parliament just gone, but hasn't done, would be some form of MP recall bill. So that because then the whip system is easier because the constituency can recall an MP if they've genuinely gone against something that the constituents as a whole would be favourable. But there are issues with that as well. But if you've got an idea for how we solve that unreconcilable, then I'm all in.
Yeah, actually, that topic, basically, you're not necessarily going to get the MPs voting the way you want them to every time, but at least a full accounting of, I voted this way, which is against the manifesto because I had 3 visits from my constituents saying this, none going against it, and my research indicated this. At least you can look at it and say, okay, they're not just doing it because they've been paid off. Or if they have been paid off, at least they've been paid to write a good story about it.
Yes, I mean, following on from that, one of the things that we're very, would be very in favour of is much more freedom of information. So anything that can be accessed under the Freedom of Information Act, we would say should be already publicly available in a sensible data format, not just on a PDF. You have to type the table into a sheet form. And that comes down to being open and honest with your constituents and doing that. Equally, there is the potential, and we've not made that decision as a party, and there was enough issues with it, I'm not sure it works fully fledged yet, but to have some form of digital engagement with your constituents about this is a contentious issue. I genuinely want to know what you as a constituency think.
Press the red button on your remote now.
Yeah, and I say there are some issues with it,
yeah.
but some form, increasing the engagement between voters and MPs, I think has to be a positive thing if you can do that.
Maybe, is there any? I've got a quick one if there isn't. So the European elections were mentioned,
yep.
And I guess it's actually a lot easier for small parties to be elected because there's, in my view, a better voting system. Although it does mean no one knows who their European MPs are. Do you stand candidates in the European elections? And is that maybe a step you could get to before having an MP?
Yes, realistically, that is any voting system that is proportional representation from some form will usually be kinder to small parties. First past the post, as we have in general elections, is shockingly difficult to break into.
It's like designed that way.
Say again?
It's almost like designed that way.
Almost like it's, well, yes. Indeed. So yes, in the last European elections, we stood candidates in the northwest region. We know our head office is in Manchester. That's where we've had our leader is from. We've had the most traction by far in there, which is why it was the northwest region that stood candidates, and why we have 3 Manchester-based candidates this time round. But I'm very much looking to stand in the European elections as a party in London next time round. And before that, the London Assembly elections next year, at the same time as the mayor elections, are proportional representation across London as a whole. And I would be very much hoping that as a party we can stand candidates then in a system that is fairer to smaller parties.
Right, yeah, well, thank you very much for that. Out of interest, I mean, who would be interested in taking part in a collaborative policy building effort on Reddit? Probably a few Reddit hits.
Not on Reddit.
I said Reddit because that's where most people can actually engage with it, but we tried to do it on a community forum as well, and even had people send us ideas and stuff as well. So that's certainly how we have done it. Going forward, we're looking to build there's a whole engine that's Ruby based that we're trying to do it in. I mean Python, yes. yes. Ooh. Sorry. I shall take my vote out of my mouth.
You're not changing your name to the Python Party.
Might also get some animal conservation license.
Okay, well, thank you for these questions, everyone, and thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much for having me. I have some leaflets if you're interested and want to know more. Come grab me.
Thank you very much. It was a bit of a different line we talked about, but it was interesting.